Thank you so much to the Patreon sponsor of this video, Dr. Jed. Incredible person, just had a great conversation with him the other day. Thank you so much for your support. Hello everyone, my name is Andrew AJT and welcome to my 20,000 subscriber special. This is going to be such a fun and amazing video for you guys that contains things that I thought I would never see again for the rest of my life. But first of all, thank you all so much for 20,000 subscribers. That is amazing. I started this channel back in 2007 making Super Mario 64 glitch videos and speedrunning type content. Not too long after that I switched to RuneScape videos, and around a year ago I started making really consistent weekly uploads, and since then, even in just the past 365 days, we've gained around 9,000 subscribers, so this has been such an amazing year for the channel, and I'm so excited for what's to come. This is a little impromptu mess that was hosted in the clan chat by Reddit Lucio, who you see on screen on the bottom left of Corp there. But I will be doing another mess. I'm not sure if it's going to be Corp in the coming weeks for 20,000 subscribers. This will be planned in a YouTube video. You'll know the time and date in advance. I'll be streaming it, all that. So there will definitely be one of those in the near future. But for this video, I wanted to show you guys something pretty special. So this is an unbelievable miracle how this video is about to be made. Basically, a few weeks ago, I uploaded this video about a bunch of things called Are Boomers Ruining OSRS, and I briefly talk about how I used to play Castle Wars back in 2006, and I found a picture, just Googling for one, of RuneScape Castle Wars 2006, and I showed that brief picture right here, and I was actually contacted by someone a few weeks ago saying, hey, you know what, that was actually me who took that picture back in 2006, and guess what, I actually have a lot more pictures like that from 2006, would you like to see them? So that means that this guy who played 13 years ago happens to be watching my video in 2019, and not only does he see it, which is so unlikely as it is, but he has over 1,000 extremely high quality pictures of RuneScape from 2006, and he was actually an incredible player back then. It's almost like in the movie The Titanic when Rose, when she's 100 years old, is watching TV and notices that they've just dug up a portrait of her in the Titanic from like 84 years ago, except that was a movie. That's just, mostly fantasy, at least in that particular story. This is something that actually happened, and it is pretty incredible. So let's take a look at some of these images. And I really want to show a lot of them. This video is probably going to be really long, but these pictures are just amazing. They're so nostalgic. Even if you didn't play back then, I think you're going to be amazed at how different things were. And if you did, then you're in for a serious treat. So this awesome guy who goes by Mo, and he actually does still play RuneScape now, sent me pictures from 4 different years, and thank you so much again for sending these. So most of them are from 2006, you'll see as we go along, but there is actually a few from 2003 and 2005. We will of course start with 2003, that is RuneScape Classic, and here's a funny picture he took, the only one he's got, and this is pretty cool. You don't really see that many pictures of RuneScape Classic that were actually taken this long ago. I mean, you can notice some things right away. Herb Law, fatigue was a thing back then, and the game screen was extremely small, and he had a pretty good account in RuneScape Classic. I mean, that is not too bad at all. Pretty cool that he's got a RuneScape Classic picture here. Let's take a look at 2005. So what you're about to see is a client called Swift Switch, and this is actually a third-party client that some people used back then, and as you see here, it actually had a screenshot feature, and that is how he got all these pictures. Thankfully, most of them don't show all this client stuff, but thankfully, a few of them do as well. So you can see there's like a world hop feature, there's some little tools there. It really wasn't like a advantageous client or anything, it wasn't really that popular either. But from this 2005 picture, we can already see a bunch of differences. There's people trading in Falador. We of course have Zazima here, which is probably why he took this picture. Pretty amazing, he was 126 back in 2005. That's just so unbelievable. Like, I don't even have any words for that, considering how newbie most people were back then, that he was a 126. I mean, you have things like this weird spellbook with a scroll bar here. Of course, the old school interface, which I love, and I use that feature on RuneLite all the time. You got old things like the chat buttons there. Not too much else to say about this one, but it is cool to see this picture of 2005 Falador Trading. This picture shows him in a purple party hat in 2005, which is extremely impressive. He later upgraded to a yellow and then sold it for gear and other rares. You can see there's over 100,000 total players on the bottom right. Websites like Miniclip and other flash game websites, which were very popular back then, did link to RuneScape. That's actually how I found it, and there was just a huge player base back then. And then he's got one more. This is a pretty good clue loot. You can see that the runes look different. He's got ranger boots there, and a Addy Kite Shield Gold, which actually would have been worth a lot back then. That's why people used to scam people by saying trimming armor. And now it is time for the golden age of RuneScape, and the best time to play RuneScape ever, 2006, and I have over 1,000 pictures to show you guys from this one guy. So there's so many that I'll probably end up making a part 2 to this video, maybe next week or something. As someone who played back then, I'm sure I'm going to have a lot to say about many of them. So we'll go through them. You can see here the fletching is lowercase. That's kind of interesting. They later capitalized all that. And you can see that this guy was an elite player. Abyssal Whip, Santa Hat, Barrows items. You can see the sharks look different there. The bank has no tabs or anything. Very good account this guy had. A lot of the pictures are of high-level players that he just encounters, and people used to actually, like, freak out when they would see a level 120 back then. I distinctly remember being in Falador back in maybe 2005, and my friend messaging me saying, dude, you gotta come to Varrock, there's a level 125 at, Varrock West Bank or something. People used to freak out when they would see a high level back then. You can see a lot of activity. There was a lot of players back then, so pretty much every major bank was going to be full of people. And of course, Sears Village Bank was a very common place for trading. People used to actually stand here in Alk as they watch Castle Wars games. No one really does that anymore. You could see all these people in the lobby, so many people playing Castle Wars. And trust me, these are not all Castle Wars pictures, but there are a few. Falador, again, a huge place for trading. Loot half keys were 25k each back then. Dragon legs were actually worth a lot back then because not many people could actually kill iron or steel dragons. Most people were like me back then. I was extremely newbie. I didn't really train skills much or do quests or know anything about being efficient. You can see the old potions there. Dragon chain body. Most people were just absolutely terrible at the game by today's standards. I mean, you see people today who play, and within a month of their first month of playing OSRS, they're doing quests, they're going for Barrows gloves, they're doing achievement diaries and stuff. Back then it was just kind of wander around, explore, talk to people, play Castle Wars minigames. Nobody really knew how important it was to train agility or, do quests or something. You could see Falador Trading here. D-Chain was 16 mil. That was such a prestigious item back then, worth more than the actual rares. A level 126, I wonder if that guy still plays. Looks like they're doing Mage Training Arena here, or Mage Arena in the Wilderness. That's a pretty cool 4 people. There was no kill counts or anything back then, or logs for how many clues you did. That's actually a pretty good clue. He's doing a recruitment drive here, so this guy actually did a lot of quests, which is very good. So many high levels he's got pictures of. There's the old Cal fights you can see there. The models were different. You can see on low detail mode here that when he's upstairs, everything around downstairs is actually black. And these actually look pretty similar. The old options here, the emotes used to be kind of written out instead of just, a little graphic, which is actually nice because it's quicker to find the emote you want, but I think they changed it because of different languages. You had to go to your options for your run and all that. House options are in here when construction was new. There's the old Iron Dragon, or maybe that's actually steel. Looks way different. Teletabs weren't really a thing yet, so you had to bring runes with you to teleport. Like you still have to do in free-to-play. Some good accounts. That looks kind of weird. Steel Ivy. So this guy's 107 combat. You could see your equipment bonuses are down here. There was no like pop-up thing for them. Iron Dragons were like an insanely good task because things like this, the plate skirt and the legs, as we talked about, are extremely valuable. That's a really good drop back then. The prayer book you can see here, wow, that is so basic. No piety. A lot of things are missing there. That is a really, really good clue. Even the Sarah page back then is probably worth a good amount. He's got the books he's building. Here's the old Varrock West Bank. Looks a lot different today. Of course, no GE back then, not even remotely close to one. Wow, Wild Dog, and is that a lesser demon or a greater demon? That's a weird one. That is a nice looking gear setup there. He's doing like some pretty advanced quests as well. Here's someone with a red party hat, which even back then was pretty valuable. Didn't see that too often as a discontinued item. So many of these pictures of other players, but trust me, this was very common back then. So this is interesting. So nowadays when you search crates or boxes or cupboards on RuneScape, you won't find anything unless you're doing a quest or something. But back then you could actually find random items like tools or gloves, as you see here, or broken swords. They eventually removed that for some reason. Iron dragons, that would have been a really nice task back then. Dragon spear, which was actually worth a lot. People didn't realize that, you know, certain items that we know are bad now, people thought they were really good back then. Like a Dragon 2H sword, that was considered a pretty comparable weapon to an Abyssal Whip, or a Dragon Spear. People would think that's a really good item, and it's very powerful. Tail Loot, I mean, the way people talked back then was different. People would say like, oh, I'll own you in the wilderness or something, or use leet speak and all that. Very common back then. I mean, the culture of the internet was just way different back then. And keep in mind that you're not really like AFKing things back then, because there was not really like make all options and stuff like that. And you don't have the screen space for it, and there's no cell phones or anything really, so you're playing on Windows 2000 on a little CRT monitor, and RuneScape is like your entire screen. So, and that's why people have the music on as well back then. Like, so many people who played back then remember the music, because you're not AFKing watching YouTube videos when you play RuneScape back then. You're listening to the game, you're exploring, you're very immersed in it. I think that's why people remember RuneScape back then so vividly. Doing construction, I remember when that came out and all the little estate agents were there, and I really wanted to get members again. You know, I had members off and on. Most of the time I was free to play and very poor and didn't know what I was doing. I used to pretty much train fishing in Karamja by catching lobsters, and then I would do that for weeks until I can afford a full rune set, and then usually pretty quickly after I would somehow lose it. Most of the time I would go PKing with my clan back then, which were the Stone Warriors, which don't exist anymore, and I would lose it, and I would be so sad, and I would have to fish it back doing lobsters, take weeks to do that, and I would usually lose it again. You know, I wasn't training construction or rune crafting and stuff like that. I was so clueless, but I was having so much fun. So the reason pictures like these are so rare is because nobody really took screenshots back then. There was no Twitter or things like that where you would post these on social media like, oh, look at me, I just got 99 construction. And most people didn't even know you could take screenshots. And, you know, maybe some people would post screenshots on forums or different fan sites like Zybez or Tippet or something. But a lot of those file upload sites don't even exist anymore, so a lot of those pictures have been lost, and, you know, people threw out their computers or they got new computers, so they don't even have those pictures anymore. I remember doing this vividly, going around here on a big, you know, train. It's just pretty amazing that these pictures actually survived. I mean, there's some videos from back then, you can find some stuff, but they're kind of all one-off things. Nobody really documented their gameplay like this guy did. These are black demons back then. They look way different, the models there. And I talked to this guy a lot, and he told me a lot of what he remembers back then. Here's a really good clue. Probably very valuable. Nowadays, these are like alchables, or you just drop them. But back in the day, people really did like the cosmetics. And some things he told me about were some of the scams back then. For example, the leaf-bladed spear kind of looks like a Guthan spear, so people would sell that with Guthans and scam people that way. Here's the pure essence and non-pure essence. That was a big deal back then. Definitely remember that as a controversy. So that was a scam. I remember being scammed once. I was so sad. You know, I'm younger, obviously, when I'm playing back in 2006, so this game really emotionally affected me sometimes. I got scammed because this guy was selling 2 rune skimmies for 20k, and 20k for both of them, like combined, so that's a really good deal. So I go to buy them from him, and at the last second he switches the 2 noted rune skimmies out for 2 noted iron skimmies, and there was hardly any way to tell unless you really were careful about it, and he traded me the 2 iron skimmies for 20k, and I got scammed for 20k, and I was so like devastated, because 20k, that could take like a day to make back. I mean, nowadays we know that you could just go to Green Dragons and make that back almost instantly, but back then that was devastating. I say you could go to Green Dragons, but that's probably when I was free to play, and most people back then were free to play. I don't know if it's most people, but certainly it was like at least kind of like 50-50. I don't know the exact numbers, but oh wow, look at that bronze dragon. That is a pretty cool looking bronze dragon. It's almost like a fire dragon. It doesn't really look bronze. But yeah, free to play was a big deal back then compared to when OSRS came out. There wasn't even free to play, but the vast majority of people that I remember playing with were free to play because it cost $4.99 to get members, and there was no like membership cards or anything. So unless you could convince your parents to get you membership, or you were older like this guy was, you would just have to play free to play, and that's just what people did back then. It was pretty normal to be only free to play. I remember being so curious as to what was behind the members gates. Wow, that is a pretty good clue as well. Fire giants, those do look pretty similar. More Castle Wars. This guy was clearly a big fan of Castle Wars, as most people were. Using a circle there, which is actually a pretty good idea because it lowers magic level against the majors. This is actually like almost made me cry. So look at this PM here. Hey, in 2 weeks I gotta go back to war. And remember, this is a long time ago, so you might have an idea of what he was talking about. And the guy Mo asks, war? Yes, in Iraq my son will be playing. So his son's gonna be playing on his account. And he's saying his son's gonna be playing on that account, and then Mo says, oh, okay. Be nice to him because this time I'm probably not coming back. And I asked Mo about this, like, hey, did that guy ever come back? We are the zero, and he frankly doesn't remember because, you know, it was such a long time ago, but we really have no way of knowing did that guy ever come home safe from the Iraq war. It's kind of sad to think about because I don't know a lot about that war or, you know, the situation over there, but I know a lot of people didn't come back, so that is just kind of eerie to think about from this 2006 picture. This is not even something that Mo pointed out to me. It was just something I noticed in his PMs there. Really sad to think about, so hopefully that guy did make it home, but we'll never know, most likely. Doing the fight caves there. Where is this? Must be the Champions Guild. Looks a little different back then. So some of this stuff I wouldn't have seen back then because I wasn't, you know, as high level of a player as this guy. This is one thing I do remember. Look at these orange, ugly stats. This was a temporary update that they did eventually revert, but you can see here, looks very weird, and I'm glad they put this back. Of course, there was no hunter back then, and when we started these pictures, there was no construction either. Here comes Jad. Don't know what happened because there's a black picture after, but I don't know if he actually managed to achieve the fire cape. I guess not, because he's wearing the Obi cape in this one, which was actually a very good cape back then. He told me about how the Obi cape was kind of like a luxury cape, and the Legends cape was very popular, especially in Runescape Classic, just because it was cheaper and it was a little bit more accessible. Here's some more PMs from that guy, and this is interesting. This is forum posts, and you can see here Modash. Modash has been around for such a long time, so, you know, he was always interacting with players, always making these forum posts. You can see a post from Paul Gower here. I think there's some more forum posts to show. Post bag from the hedge. This was kind of like a newsletter thing that I do remember. Apparently this was about the orange skills, which looked really weird. This was about the run being in the options, which was later moved to a minimap orb. And this was actually adding the defensive option to magic training. We got some gear pictures for Iron and Steel Dragons tasks. That is a very nice loot. I mean, you look at this and think, wow, that's crap, but that's actually a very good loot. And this is so weird. I guess they updated this, and this must not have been around for too long, because I really don't remember this interface too much. Pretty good gear there. Dragon gloves, which you might make fun of, but back then people used like leather gloves, so that's actually very good. He told me about how the Canifis, like gold gloves, were actually designed to be members only, but they accidentally made them free to play, and that's why people would have those like Canifis colored gloves back then, or like the gnome ones, because they were just accidentally free to play. I remember buying the gold gloves back then and just thinking they were so cool with Rune in free to play. People used to stand under the cannon, which was thought to be most efficient back then. Pretty nice looking gear here, probably playing fight pits. There's some more of the yellowish stats. Really bad looking. Good thing they didn't keep those. Wandering around. I mean, this is the type of picture you might see from back then where people are just kind of taking cool pictures or wandering around. And this guy's stats are getting very, very good for the time. Probably getting some Tokul here for the cape. Making house tabs for the first time. Maybe doing some Slayer there. Was still pretty popular to do Sears Village trading. I mean, you could just see the gear people have here. It's not the best, using a Mithril Longsword as your main weapon or Rune Battle Axe. Got some more questing here. Got Mage Arena. The wilderness was really scary back then for most people. I mean, when you think of wilderness in real life, you think of you could get lost, it's dangerous, you might never come back, and that's kind of what people thought of the wilderness back then in RuneScape. There's the old imp there. Looks pretty cool. Looks like you got the Mage Training Arena, or Mage Arena, done. Some very high levels with bunny ears, so that's a really old player there. I wonder how many of those high levels still play. Probably some of them, but I'm guessing most of them haven't played RuneScape in a decade. Really good deal for Robin Hood hat and Ranger boots there. And you can see these old Windows icons, very nostalgic themselves as well. Some more Slayer here. This guy's getting really up there in level. A very good clue reward there, Guthix legs. Probably worth several 100k back then, which was a lot of GP then. Gargoyles, that's a pretty cool looking picture. People used to do that. Google Translate back then. Don't know why that picture's in there, but that's pretty nice to see as well. Jellies, I'm sure people knew back then that this was a good source of clues. This is one of the most popular training spots back then because you got the altar over there from Monkey Madness. This guy's doing gargoyles. You could actually do gargoyles for G-Malls and actually make a lot of money, whereas today they're worth almost nothing. Or Castle Wars. I'm really glad that even though this guy was so efficient back then, even he took the time to go play Castle Wars, which, you know, I've talked about this in the past, but people don't do that anymore. So many people. I think this is one of the pictures I actually used for that video. But there was a lot of people back then. You could bring a cat into Castle Wars back then? That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that. A couple other anecdotes. One thing is the whip spec was actually different when it came out. It had a chance of either hitting a 0 or hitting your max hit, and it was extremely expensive because of that. Eventually they changed it to what it is now, where it lowers run energy and it's terrible. In August of 2006 as well, they updated the graphics for things like demons, although you can actually get a demon mask from Master Clues in OSRS that has the old style of demon. He did the actual Mage Training Arena, which is so annoying nowadays, and that's with all the quality of life updates, so I can't imagine how bad it was back then. But because there was no GE, if you wanted things like Infinity Boots, you might have to go earn them yourself. You know, it's hard to find a buyer for things sometimes. You'd have to get kind of lucky. And because things were so rare like that, if you actually found someone, you might have to overpay for it. There was no stamina potions, which kind of sucked, so you pretty much walked everywhere. And really, there was no way to refill your run energy either. You would just have to use energy potions, which only gave 10% each, or wait. There's the old skeletons, which look really cool. Some PKing, which is actually kind of nice to see. He didn't really take many pictures of PKing, but I believe he did PK a little bit. The new black demons there. Still looks so odd, the black floor there, but I do remember that. That might be a low detail mode thing, because back then there was a low detail and high detail. But today we basically only have high detail in OSRS, unless you maybe use a RuneLite plugin to get low detail back. This was a good moneymaker back then, the Tokul. He definitely played a lot of Castle Wars because of that armor you see there. Wow, we are gonna own. That's definitely how you know this is 2006. Also, look at the gear here. There's those gold gloves which I talked about from Canifis. There's a guy using a Verax flail, Dragon Battle Axe, Dragon Longsword, you know, just random assortments of gear. I mean, I can't even spend all the time I want to talking about these pictures. I could probably say a lot about all of them. I don't want this video to be 20 hours long, but, you know, you might want to watch this video again and just take another look at some of these pictures, because it's just amazing how different things were. Granite Maul drop here is first one. Trying some more Fire Cape attempts. You didn't have that much bank space back then, so you couldn't really afford to keep useless items like I do. Bunch of Barrow sets. It's actually really impressive that he has almost every single one. More Slayer here. 9 million for full Guthans, so this was considered a very, very powerful set back then. Remember, there was no SGS, so Guthans was extremely valuable, especially because food was harder to get. You had to buy it manually. Slayer here. So the old Falador, there was no party room here yet. It used to be in Sears Village. Green Mask is 26 mil. I'm glad you got a picture of this. Buying full Sarah, no kite, 1.6 mil. That is way, way more than people think of that as being worth today. Selling rune trim legs. I mean, people might spend a couple hours just trying to sell rune trim legs. Nowadays, you just alch it. Santa is 25 mil. I think in RuneScape 3 now it's like 300, 400 mil or something. Green Mask, 26 mil. So if you kept those items, you're in pretty good shape now. I think they still continue to go up. Wonder if that person still plays. So this is when the Gilded Altar was pretty new. Definitely was popular to have like house parties back then, even just for fun. Not even just for Gilded Altars. Glory was 70k, that's interesting. Let's see, what did they say? But I have 60k please, that's all I got. 61k. Looks like he was negotiating, although I guess that guy did end up getting 70,000. Full rock shell. I mean, who would spend the time to sell full rock shell nowadays? D-bed, that's a very nice drop. It used to be one of the best helmets in the game, so it was not really a troll drop back then. Maybe that's a skiller. I don't know why we take a picture of a level 4. Skillers were popular back then, like level 3 skillers. Looks like he's doing Monkey Madness. A lot of people had trouble with that quest back then. It was considered extremely difficult. Mutated Zygomites. Some bank pictures here. I've talked about this before a long time ago, but back then it was almost like everyone was a semi-Iron Man. I mean, trying to get the stuff for farming was almost impossible. I mean, if you wanted to buy Magic Seeds, you probably have to buy one at a time. If you can even find someone to buy one from. Evil Chicken, that's an old random. Don't have that anymore. Did have those when OSRS came out, but they eventually made them kind of like you can just ignore them now, and they took away the dangerous ones. Keep in mind, this is the old death mechanics, so whenever you die, all of your shit appears on the floor instantly for everyone to pick up, except for 3 items, and the 3 items that you keep are not chosen very well. They were chosen based on alch value, so, you know, if you had a white party hat or something on you, and you died with full bronze on you, you would keep the bronze over the party hat, so it was a very, very dangerous game. I mean, you could disconnect, you could die from a boss, anything could happen, and you could lose almost everything. Part 2 of this video will be uploaded next week on Christmas Eve 2019, so if you're watching this in the future and that's already passed, then go check out the top link of the description to move on to Part 2 right now. or you can wait to the end of the video and it'll be in the end screen as well. So that is about the first half of the pictures right there from 2006, and next week we will go over the second half of the pictures, and there's also a few miscellaneous cool ones and even some videos and pictures of forum posts that we can go over. There's even a handful from 2007, and you can see the progression of the game. If you guys have any questions for Mo, the owner of these pictures, I know I certainly did. I spent many hours talking about the pictures with him. He was so helpful in giving so much context behind these. Definitely leave your questions down below in the comments. Maybe next week or even the week after we'll do a little bit of a Q&A, depending on how many questions you guys have. And thanks again to Mo, aka GatePid on Reddit, from the original Reddit posts from the Castle Wars pictures. He was so helpful when making this video and really made it all possible. Please hit the like button if you agree with me that the 06 version of RuneScape needs to be talked about more and treasured. I know the 07 version was very good and that's what we have the game based on now, but the 06 version was very charming in itself, and I think we need to talk about it more. The amount of people who played back then and still play today is shrinking by the day, so I'm happy to do my part by sharing some memories of that time in the game, and you can do the same by sharing some memories of your earliest RuneScape experiences in the comments, regardless of what year they were. Definitely share the video as well. I'm sure if you made it this far, you probably enjoyed it, and hopefully others will as well. And hit the sub button if you enjoyed and want to see the future uploads every Tuesday, and hit the bell icon as well to get notifications whenever I do upload. If you're having trouble getting notifications, check your bell settings and make sure it's set to all notifications and not personalized, because if it's on personalized, you might not get the notification. Whereas if it's on all, you should get a notification for every video if it's working correctly. A few people told me recently that they were having trouble getting bell notifications, so hopefully that clears up the issue. But let me know if you're still having problems. Otherwise, you can join my clan chat in game, AndrewAJT62, that'll be up on screen. You can join my Discord down below. You can follow me on Twitter down below, and I'll follow you back if you play RS. And you can support the channel further with my Patreon page linked in the end screen if you're feeling generous. Thank you all so much for watching. 2006 RuneScape will live forever, and it continues next week.